Hello everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'm back at it with yet another video. And today we're going to be taking a look at the up and coming full moon in the sign of Scorpio. Now, if you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Click the bell button below so you can get alerts for my other videos. I'm here on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Sundays using tarot and astrology to make sense of what's going on in the cosmos. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you like this video, consider sharing, and drop me your rising sign below in the comments. Let me know how you guys are feeling with this spicy full moon. Now, I'm excited to talk to you guys about this. It's going to be happening on May the 1st, 2026, around 12:23 p.m. Central Time. I'm here in Texas, so that's going to be closer to around 10:23 a.m. Pacific, 1:23 a.m. p.m. Eastern Time, and other places all over the world. So adjust your time zones depending on where you guys are. But I don't think we're going to miss this one. Now, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what this full moon means. We're going to break down the aspects and kind of talk about the predictions, how to work with it, and what to be expecting based off of your rising or sun sign. So stay tuned to the end of the video to get that info. Now, the actual full moon is going to be taking place around 11 degrees and change of Scorpio. So if you have any personal planets, 10, 11, 12 degrees of Scorpio, sun, moon, rising, or if you have this as like a personal placement for a planet, an angle, or a node, you're going to be feeling the effects of this. And it'll be impacting 10 to 12 degrees of the fixed signs as well. So Taurus, Leo, and Aquarius risings, you guys will feel the impact from this through the opposition or the square. Now, obviously the moon in Scorpio is known to be very intense. This is quite a magnetic placement to have the moon in, and very karmically charged for some of the aspects that we're going to be seeing. And we're going to be dealing with, when we have a full moon, just this profound kind of like emotional revelation. It can also represent kind of an emotional kind of peak, clearing out, detoxing, dealing with power dynamics, fated adjustments, and some deep soul level transformations, specifically around Taurus and Scorpio kind of themes, because we're going to see the full moon. And obviously this can be anything connected to intimacy, shared resources, and obviously exposing hidden truth. That's very much what a full moon in Scorpio is good for. Now, if you guys want to pull out your charts so that way we can take a look, you want to see which house Scorpio is in, that's where you're going to be seeing that peak. And we're going to be looking at the polarity between Scorpio and Taurus. Now, Scorpio is traditionally ruled by Mars, so we'll talk about Mars, but it also has connections in its modern day ruler to Pluto. So this is why there's themes of passion. There can also be themes of transformation, endings, and beginnings. So we generally kind of see here in the Northern Hemisphere, now we're kind of making our way into springtime. So it's really kind of highlighting the polarity of Sun and Taurus, life, beauty, values, pleasure, and then the shadow side of this axis, which is, well, regeneration. Scorpio moon is kind of like the fertilizer for everything to grow. So if you're looking for a good full moon to like do a detox, maybe get back into therapy, be doing some shadow work, or just really uncovering all of the things that have been kind of like, hidden in the closet, or, the monsters under the bed. We want to dig out all the rot. This is a good full moon to do that. Now, traditionally, we have a full moon every month. This is kind of like the climax or the peak period in the lunar cycle. And this new moon, this full moon actually dates back to a new moon that we had back in Scorpio season last year. So we'll take a look at that in a second. But full moons represent this kind of peak period in the lunar cycle. And this is where the moon is at maximum illumination. So we're going to see a lot of emotional culmination and energetic release. Lots of ugly tears we can kind of see with Scorpio full moons. And symbolically, it really kind of represents that sacred opposition between the sun, which can be about consciousness, it can be identity, outward action, and the moon, which is more of our kind of instinctual, kind of subconscious emotions, our inner world, and anything that's been kind of stirring around. And it shows tension through the opposition. It's 180 degrees. And oppositions kind of bring us to the forefront of having to confront something, wrap it up, or see some kind of conclusion. So the tension likely has been hidden because it's in Scorpio, and it brings all of the shadows fully into light through the full moon. And what it's really asking us to do is kind of like integrate the opposites. And often when we see this, it powers very kind of trigger kind of moments. And obviously there's a lot of like fruitful intentions that can go with a full moon. This is about a completion of a cycle and this natural release of what doesn't serve us any longer. Now, this particular full moon in Scorpio, like I said, it was seeded 6 months ago. It was around November 20th, 2025. And I got to show this to you guys because this was quite an intense new moon. So I'm sure you remember, but we were in the midst of like, you know, going in or out of a Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. Looks like we were in it. I remember this one. And not only were we in a new moon, okay, so 6 months later it becomes a full moon, but it was a cazimi moment. So Mercury was actually retrograde in conjunction to the sun and also to the moon. And it was all at 28 degrees. So it's like a Cancer degree, lots of emotions, lots of purging, lots of transformation when it comes to joint finances, taxes. And this was a time where, you know, we were also watching Mercury. It had been kind of nuzzling up next to Mars. So there was just a lot of, you know, exposés, you know, crazy information coming out in the media, things that were being kind of revealed. And Scorpio is really good for that. It's about kind of exposing the underworld. So crimes, secrets, you know, things that have been concealed. And this was a new moon that was in direct opposition to Uranus in Taurus. Now, fun fact, I know we're talking about the full moon right now, but the next new moon that we're going to have is going to be conjunct Algol. So Algol has really featured quite strongly, not only in this particular new moon, but we're going to see it in the next new moon that's going to be in Taurus. Now, by then, Uranus will have, you know, kind of shimmied into Gemini. So we're going to be done with Uranus at that degree. But this brings a lot of volatility in the markets. This brings a lot of changes with the earth. There's lots of changes with frequencies. Certainly crypto is kind of like all over the place when we see Algol kind of getting triggered because it has represented in recent years where there's been a lot of instability with banking, markets, bond, and any kind of untraditional kind of assets. So I put that out there because usually when we look at a new moon, it's going to talk a lot about what's going to happen over 6 months' time, what likely is going to be like the big kind of like full moon moment. It had some sweet spots. Certainly the trines to Saturn and Neptune made us a little bit more psychically tapped in. We were more aware of our dreams. We were kind of clearing out fears and phobias. All of this was retrograde, as was Mercury. So likely things that were kind of, you know, we were thinking about or we were kind of marinating on, now it's kind of coming full, you know, kind of full circle. So interesting. The oppositions that we saw to Uranus was, I remember those, it was just kind of like frazzled, all the information that was going on. I believe we saw some pretty big like market dips that were also kind of happening in November as well. So I'm wondering if now we're going to be seeing some of the economic decisions, some of the changes that was going on with banking, with interest rates, if now that's really kind of hitting like a peak, you know, kind of point in the cycle. So anyway, back then, whatever we kind of seeded emotionally, whether it was like desires for transformation, maybe we were doing shadow work, there was a lot more kind of intimate conversations or kind of like budgeting things that were going on. Now we are reaching that full expression through the full moon kind of culmination. So the universe is really now going to be showing us the results of like kind of that deep inner planting and reassessment and rethinking through all of like the retrograde energies, whether we're ready or not. So let's fast forward and we'll get into this full moon here. There we go. On May the 1st. Now, I think that kind of like thinking about, you know, the moon being in Scorpio, I have to kind of talk to you about how it's kind of situated. Can be a more difficult placement to have. And those of you guys who have a natal moon in the 8th house, or if you've got moon in Scorpio, or if you've got even a lot of Scorpio like in your 4th house, that energy of the moon, you know, being in this sign, it's in detriment. So it basically means in traditional astrology that the moon feels challenged here. And that's because Scorpio is obviously fixed. It's a feminine sign. It's more kind of internal, and it's known for its intensity because of its connection to Mars and Pluto. So there's a lot of Plutonian depth. There's this transformative edge, obviously, to the moon in Scorpio as well. And it's going to contrast with the moon's natural exaltation, which is where the sun is in Taurus. So traditionally, the moon is very fluid, right? It's feminine. It's nurturing, and it has that kind of natural connection to Cancer. So when the moon goes through Scorpio, the placement turns the emotional waters more passionate. We see it be more obsessive. It can be this kind of alchemical rather than kind of gentle energy, and it will amplify these feelings. So the feelings of power, I guess, can be one of the positive kind of attributes of the Scorpio moon, but also vulnerability, jealousy, and crisis that needs to be kind of purged out and then be reborn. So it's not a soft, kind of gentle, reflective full moon. This is one that is very soul level, kind of crucible for emotional death and rebirth. Now we're going to be seeing this happen at 11 degrees. And those of you guys who watch my content, you know I like to apply as many different kind of ways of looking at the lunation. We like to look at the Sabian symbol to kind of get deeper meaning. We like to look at the degree theory to kind of see what the degrees indicate. And 11 degrees is always a hold on to your shorts type of degree because it has that connection to Aquarius. So it's going to be talking about things that are going to be speeding up or happening rapidly. Okay, so this is a degree that's associated with innovation, rebellion, things that kind of happen very quickly. It's also about kind of going against the norms. It does have like a humanitarian angle, and it can be good for sudden breakthroughs, but likely with the full moon in Scorpio, it's going to represent there is this sudden kind of crisis that comes up and we're like, whoa, we have to deal with this. You know, we have to deal with this now. And specifically in Scorpio, it makes me think about breaking through power structures and hidden control. All of the things that are kind of the trappings, you know, that kind of freak us out from evolving and kind of having freedom. It's also about visionary transformation that can inspire collective change because 11 degrees deals with the collective. It has that kind of connection to, you know, the Aquarian kind of masses and sudden insights into intimacy, secrets, as well as shared resources. We may also find that this is a portal for revolutionary healing through confronting the shadow. So these are some stuff that, some things that you guys might potentially be seeing at the time of the full moon. And I would say kind of from really the end of April through maybe about the 2nd or the 3rd of May is when you guys are going to be feeling the effects of this the most. Now, this full moon really in a nutshell is asking, what hidden truth or power dynamic are you ready to shatter so you can have or create space for an authentic rebirth? Okay, and it's something likely we've been working on for the better part of like the last 6 months. Now the Sabian symbol we actually round up for, so we would be reading this for 12 degrees, and the Sabian symbol for that is an official embassy ball. And I'm kind of having deja vu as I say this right now because I feel like if I remember correctly, this was an eclipse. Sorry guys, I should have looked at this first. I mean, it's been a while since we've had the eclipses in Scorpio, but just bear with me for a second. We had an eclipse somewhere around here because I feel like I remember saying something about that Sabian symbol in recent years. Okay, so here's where we had a lunar eclipse in Taurus, but Mars was at that degree. Maybe it was that. I could have sworn we had something. Oh, now I'm going the wrong way. Hello. I could have sworn we had something around. No, it wasn't that one. Wasn't that one. Maybe it was the South Node. I guess I could be wrong. Maybe it was a retrograde or a Kazemi, but I could have sworn that we had a conversation about that in a previous video. Okay, so back to what we're talking about now. Let's get back to 2025. But we're familiar with that, and gosh, it must have been like a Mercury retrograde video or something, but that's gonna drive me crazy. All right, so let me show you guys the Sabian symbol for this one. Sorry, I'm all over the place. In May. All right, so an official embassy ball is what we're gonna be reading. And where is that? All right, so we're gonna read the Sabian symbol for 12 degrees of Scorpio. So this is an embassy ball. The theme is formal maneuvers. The symbol speaks to the social ritual at its highest and the opportunity it brings each individual to recognize himself, whether or not his perceptions and hopes of expectations that first moved him to pledge or affiliate himself with a particular organization or cause have been realized or met. The image of an embassy ball is associated with politics and government. The dance alludes to the intricate steps and fancy footwork that must be learned in effective social maneuvering. Implicit in this symbol is a dramatization of values. Here, the political process of a group is exposed as either means to encourage to develop personal excellence among its members or a tool to exploit the skills and resources of the weak and disenfranchised. The emphasis here is a symbol of revelation through theatrical exaggeration and the chance to see things for what they really are. At its highest, the symbol represents natural poise and grace and facilitates group integrity and stability. Watch for arrogance and class consciousness or use of Machiavellian tactics to achieve desired ends. The accent is on lavish show and formality. Activities center on events that require you to look and perform your best. Your greatest advantage lies in following the lead to those in the know. Let others speak and act first, and then make your move. Guard against committing faux pas by failing to adequately inform yourself beforehand for the proper protocol or custom for important social ritual or occasion. Stepping stones is formality, dance, grandeur, social drama, politics, show, prompt, and ceremony, splendor, and affiliation or maneuvering. All right, so that's got some interesting stuff that's going on there. I could have sworn maybe it was like a Mercury retrograde conjunct that degree where there was like a Cazimi or something, or maybe it was like, it wasn't a Venus retrograde, but something happened at that degree. So I'll have to go back and look. But my thoughts on this is like, ooh, it's kind of like a spooky Sabian symbol. It's kind of like potentially exposing parties for whether or not they're just, pandering, posturing, if they're like intending to do good, or if there's something that's being kind of exposed, or if they're getting caught like exploiting, disenfranchised like groups of people. So this symbol for me really speaks to maybe diplomatic navigation of kind of complex, power and relationships. Group consciousness expressed through ritual and also protocol, because you think about like the ball and that's kind of like a ritual in itself, and that there's like traditions and things that they have to do. Maybe maintaining harmony amid intense, underlining kind of tension, and social displays that might be masking strategic alliances, or if there's going to be kind of like rituals and things that are happening that people aren't really kind of recognizing. And obviously the positive here is like, this is a symbol that's known for the art of kind of like graceful transformation. So if we apply this to the full moon, this is really, I think for a lot of us, about kind of approaching our deepest emotional revelations and also power struggles with more of like diplomatic skill and, maybe a little bit of like strategic grace. And some hidden dynamics require careful protocol and ritual to transform without destruction. So the lesson here is, I think, to kind of honor the dance of power while revealing truths that kind of foster genuine rebirth, and obviously mutual empowerment is going to be a big theme. So let's take a look at what's going on with the degrees and what's happening with all of the aspects in the full moon. As you guys know, I always tell you that the aspects are going to deem and kind of determine whether or not this is going to be an easy one to navigate or if it's going to be more challenging. Now, every full moon is going to come with the moon in opposition to the sun. That's what makes the full moon, through like that opposition and the polarity, and really highlighting the intensity of the sign that the moon is going to be in. So this is really finding that balance, and I think it's really navigating the tension between the moon being in Scorpio and the sun being in Taurus. And like the Taurus sun is all about finding stability, security, our personal resources, versus the Scorpio moon, which is, well, what we're kind of afraid to kind of discuss, or what we're afraid to face emotionally. Transformation, shared assets, that's very Scorpio. So things like taxes, partners' money, inheritances, money that's owed, like debt. And it really highlights that push and pull between holding on for safety and letting go for rebirth. Now, like I said, the moon's at 11 degrees, and we're going to be focusing more on the rulers, and then we'll kind of get into the aspects that the moon is making. But the traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars. Okay, so Mars is in its domicile, it's in its home sign, it's in Aries, and it's obviously in conjunct or quincunx the moon. So we automatically see a little disharmony between the moon and the ruler. So that's kind of like my first red flag for a lot of people. So you're not just going to want to look at during the full moon the house that it's landing in. Yes, you'll see some kind of like peak moment in that area of your chart, but you also want to look at where the rulers are. So there's something that's kind of through the inconjunct or the quincunx rubbing the moon and Mars the wrong way. Now they're both ruled by Mars, so this is a lot of Martian energy in the sky, but they're not necessarily seeing each other through like a classical aspect. So it means that they're trying to reconcile something through the inconjunct or the quincunx. We also see that Mars is very close by to Saturn. It's still within about a 7-degree orb. So it's going to be felt. We are feeling pretty much the end of April all the way into this full moon that Saturn still kind of has a lasso and it's pulling back on Mars. Now Mars is foot on the gas pedal. Mars in Aries is, you know, kind of get out of my way. I want to be the first. I want to do this thing. I want to have freedom. I want to initiate stuff. And Saturn is still kind of saying, okay, but slow down. You know, there's some rules, there's some regulations. We're going to be dictating and determining just exactly how fast, how far, and what direction you're going in. Now, the good news is that Aries is very much about the self, and we've got Mars playing with home field advantage here. So when it comes to committing, you know, on a personal level, Aries, committing to a new standard for yourself, committing to new goals, committing to change, to detoxing, purging, transforming, and finding ways to kind of navigate through physical movement, how to deal with all of this frustration. And so body movement, you know, sunshine, heat, working up a sweat, sticking to, you know, our own personal routine, having a morning routine, and where physical movement can help transmute some of the negative emotions. I really think this is key. And I think that we have enough time here as we're coming to, you know, like the end of April to prepare for this. And like the positive mental and psychological changes that can happen just through having to endure, you know, difficult times, timelines, you know, pressed schedules, and just kind of like, you know, nose to the grindstone. So I think it's really going to be about, yeah, things are difficult, but, you know, challenges can be good. And like there can be something that we can kind of gain in terms of psychological and physical strength by going through, you know, a little bit of turbulence. So try to have some appreciation for Saturn in the midst of this. For many of us, we might feel like we're actually having big breakthroughs emotionally, and it's because we start moving our body or we start kind of committing to better body care. I love Scorpio full moons for doing detoxes. I mean, like, it's the best time of the year to do it unless you've got like a retrograde in Scorpio or maybe Mercury or Mars going through Scorpio. We're not going to have that for some time. We're actually going to see that Mars won't be going there until next year. We're going to have a Mars retrograde. So it's going to be quite a delay before we get Mars into Scorpio in 2027. So if you have been wanting to do a detox or a cleanse, obviously, hi, I'm an astrologer. I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice, but I love doing, like I'll do like fasts on Scorpio full moon. Sometimes I'll be like, I'm doing a heavy metal detox. Sometimes I'll spend a little bit more time, you know, that week going to a sauna or, you know, doing anything where I'm cutting processed food and crap out of my system. Scorpio is associated with the reproductive organs, the bowels, anything that's also connected to kind of like psychological kind of behavior. So if you're wanting to do a purge of any kind, this would be a good time to potentially consider doing that. And I've seen a lot of people who are more inclined to go and do like enemas, colonics, focusing on reproductive health. That can be something else that can be really helpful during the time of a Scorpio full moon. And with Mars and Saturn being there, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to be doing a heavy metal detox because this is the best time to be clearing that out of my system. And I'm going to be pairing that probably with doing a lot of sauna because Mars and Saturn are in there. So if I'm choosing to use this as, okay, I'm going to be in a confined heated space, I know that if I detox some of the stuff out of my body, it's going to be, you know, regenerative. That's the beauty of Scorpio. The real, I think, medicine is, you know, kind of getting rid of all the poison. We know that Scorpio is a scorpion, so it's got that stinger. But if we can remove the poisons and if we can be a little bit more cautious and careful about what we're consuming or what we're watching, what we're eating, you know, and also what we're enduring, you know, in our day-to-day life, I think we can have quite a breakthrough. So let's make lemonade. The other thing that I think about is that we are going to be seeing that Mars is starting to come into a square with Jupiter. Now it's about 4 degrees off from that, but that tells me that there's definitely going to be something up where there's going to be a huge push to overcome something or to like move mountains. Like I think about Mars in Aries squaring Jupiter in Cancer. It's like A lot of people are going to go, I really want to move, or I really want to tackle that home project, or, you know, I really want to buy something, but I'm waiting for interest rates to change, you know? And so certainly a Scorpio full moon is going to start to kind of show us probably within a month or so if there's going to be changes in interest rates, and that might incentivize a lot of buyers to buy if rates come down. It might incentivize a lot of people also if they don't come down to go, I'm going to stay where I am, you know, and I'm going to improve, or I'm going to renovate. Or I'm going to be, you know, called to look in other areas or in other neighborhoods. So I do think there is going to be some kind of an impact that is going to be happening with the housing market. However, Mars square Jupiter can also mean that there's a lot of wanting to do things too quickly, wanting to grow too quickly, move too quickly, and that there is this personal conflict between our own individual drive, Mars and Aries, versus, you know, what's kind of going on emotionally, Jupiter and Cancer, or what's going on the home front, what's going on with our families. So I actually really love this to do like a home purge. I feel like if you're someone who's like me that just kind of like collects things, if you have noticed that there's just a ton of stuff in your fridge, right? There's a ton of stuff in your pantry. There's maybe a lot of things that are in your closets or your garage. Cancer is generally, it's the home in general, but it's more the kitchen. This might be incentivizing a lot of people to be like, let's get this spring cleaning underway. Let's maybe clear all that stuff out. What can we donate that we don't need? What should we be recycling, Scorpio? What can we fix or kind of make new? Maybe Scorpio, they're really good at kind of like, you know, transforming things and kind of turning somebody's trash into somebody else's treasure. And quite frankly, what's broken, we need to just get rid of. So this is a great cleaning house vibe. And being physically active in the process. I have found like a really great hack that I started doing when I saw squares between Jupiter and Saturn, and now I'm going to use it when Mars is squaring Jupiter, is when I'm like, you know, walking dogs, or if I'm, you know, cleaning the house or anything, I'm wearing a weighted vest. I mean, sometimes like I've even worn it like under a sweatshirt when I go to the grocery store and I go grocery shopping. Sounds silly, but I've tried to find ways to work being like physically active into the things that I'm doing just around the house. So feel free to steal that one from me, because Mars is very much about developing, toning muscle, being active, and then simultaneously trying to get things done at home. And so you'd be surprised, those of you guys who know, who've done like a complete gutting of your pantry or even your garage, you know that after all the squatting, getting up, getting down, moving things around, you know, it's like, it's quite the workout. So working out or clearing things out is going to have, I think, a really big, through the full moon, kind of like emotional kind of shift. So make sure you guys are staying active. Now, the moon in itself, obviously in Scorpio, is also making some aspects. Let's talk about sweet before we talk about salty. Sweet is that the Scorpio moon is trining Jupiter, and Jupiter is in a lunar sign. So there is some mutual reception here. So this does seem to kind of imply that it's very possible and very likely that some of the emotional clearing may not only be good for our home, but I think it's also going to be good for our heart, our emotional state. Moon trine Jupiter generally promotes good vibes, you know, feeling a little bit more emotionally optimistic. So we could definitely see that, you know, some people are kind of feeling like, yeah, it felt good to declutter. It felt good to detox. It felt good to go to therapy. It felt good to get all of the difficult things out in the open. And I could see like a lot of people who are contemplating financing, particularly connected to home goods. So whether you're like, hey, I need to get new furniture, or I'm thinking about, you know, even refinancing if rates do go down, some people might be considering doing that to exchange and kind of change homes or expand their homes in some way. And just lots of transformation with how people are talking about home expenses, what it's costing for energy, what it's costing for rent, what groceries are costing. And so there's going to be a lot more of an emphasis on like balancing and budgeting. And remember that full moons, they do make things bigger. So we could see a lot of people kind of going like, wow, we're looking at our energy bill, it's going up. We're looking at our water bill, it's going up. Or they're just noticing that there's just more of like an emotional kind of effect on fluctuations and changes that are going on with, you know, kind of like joint money. So, you know, families, partners, things like that, roommates, and just kind of discussing some of the increased cost of goods. That's the opposition that you're seeing to the sun. Now, the challenge here is that the moon is in about a 5-6 degree square to Pluto. So we are going to feel that. You guys are actually going to feel that right as the moon is coming into Scorpio. So kind of like the morning of May the 1st, the moon will start squaring Pluto. Now, this is crucial because Pluto is kind of like the modern day, ruler, and Pluto's in Aquarius. It's going to be there for a while. I think that what this is saying is that this full moon is going to bring up a lot of intense revelations, power struggles. You're going to see compulsive emotional purging. Psychological depths will likely surface, and this is really about radical transformation with Pluto in Aquarius. So I'm anticipating for a lot of us, this is going to bring up hidden truths, control issues, collective kind of, shadow stuff that's coming to light with an unstoppable force. Now, between the moon squaring Pluto, okay, where there's like emotional purging, and then we've got the moon that's in conjunct Mars, these are some difficult aspects for the moon to be in. So lean into the moon trine Jupiter for how things feel, maybe tapping into your intuition to kind of soften some of those edges. But that moon quincunx Mars, like I said, it's an adjustment. So I always kind of see it like sandpaper, something that's kind of rubbing us the wrong way. This basically means that we have to move through whatever crisis comes up during the time of the full moon, and we have to deal with the deep kind of Scorpio emotions and the fiery kind of nature of Mars in Aries, which is all about action. Irritation, misalignment kind of arises when we see this aspect, and if we're impulsive, and if our drive is impulsive with Mars and Aries, then there can be clashes and it can bring up a lot of emotional intensity. So really this requires conscious tweaks, and I think it's about really avoiding burnout or kind of like passive aggressive outbursts, because we can definitely see that with all this Martian energy in the skies. Now remember, like I said, Mars and Saturn are conjunct, so this is about action meeting discipline. And or restriction. And this conjunction oftentimes gives us kind of like, okay, this structured kind of patient drive. That's the positive of Mars and Saturn, which we'll be feeling a couple days leading up to this, but we can also feel that there's frustration, that there's limits. And it's building long-term power through focused effort while kind of like teaching boundaries around anger and initiative. One of the first things that I was thinking about when I saw this is I was like, man, I was reading an article the other day, and they were saying that most Americans don't have the extra funds in their bank account should they have like a $500 emergency. Most people can't really afford right now to have to, fix a broken down vehicle, replace tires. God forbid they have a medical crisis, right? They just don't have the funds to do that. And a lot of people are kind of finding that they're just more and more becoming, kind of comfortable putting things on credit cards and like maxing out their balances. And I look at this and I'm like, people are going to have to be very diligent with Mars and Saturn quincunx this moon to make sure that they are taking care of business when it comes to debt. And I've talked to a lot of clients over the last couple of months that are like, yeah, man, now I'm just realizing I'm just paying it every month, and it's literally just going towards the interest. It's not even paying the principal balance. And that's some scary stuff. I mean, I understand, but this is definitely a full moon for some people that there could be some kind of financial reckoning. That's like, okay, I can't just put it on the card. I'm maxing out a card, or I no longer feel like I can just dip into savings, or, now I'm realizing that even budgeting isn't really cutting it. I'm having to kind of cut corners. So the medicine in this, although it's agitating with Mars and Saturn, is that people are going to be recognizing, hey, there's something that came up in this area. I have to be more diligent. I have to be more mature. I have to really be cautious and not really be having knee-jerk reactions where I'm just kind of dipping into things. And if people have not been doing that, then they're going to see something probably get triggered during this particular, full moon. Now, the positive, I think, is that the moon is making that trine to Jupiter. So a lot of people are going to go, yep, I need to do what I need to do for security. And if that means that I'm, saving some extra cash, or I'm, maybe putting some extra supplies away, they're going to be better prepared. But I think about that Mars-Jupiter square that's going to be building, and you'll see that a couple days after the full moon, which is really kind of saying, okay, this tense aspect is kind of pitting that bold Mars that's independent action against expansive, family and emotional needs. So a lot of people are going to be jumping into action going, what do I need to have at home? What do I need to be having for security? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be going into crazy prepper mode. I'm not saying that, but it's a lot of people going, okay, well, do we have, some extra water? Do we have some canned goods? For others, it could also mean that there is some kind of sudden, quote unquote crisis that's happening, and they're like, okay, I need to make sure that my family's good. I'm checking on my neighbors. I'm calling my siblings. You know, I'm making sure that we have an emergency plan in order, God forbid, something were to happen, and we're kind of jumping into action preemptively to prepare for whatever our home or our family is going to need, whatever security things we may need. And so what this can do, though, is that it can create overexpansion. It can be about overdoing it, overreacting. I think a lot of people will overreact to things under this full moon. And once again, there is this conflict between our personal drive with Mars and Aries and our kind of emotional security with Jupiter and Cancer. And so, yes, it can fuel courageous kind of growth if we channel it wisely, but we want to make sure that we're not just overreacting and kind of like, you know, blowing our tops off. Now, the moon in Scorpio is also making a very interesting aspect, and I wonder if you guys can see it. Okay, so it is making a very interesting aspect. See that this is at 11, see that this is at 9, and this is at 9. The moon is the focal point of a yod between Saturn, Venus, and the moon. And so we call this a yod, finger of fate, finger of God. So we've got a sextile, and then we've got Venus that's quincunx the moon. We've got Saturn that's quincunx the moon. And this basically means that the way out of the inconjunct, where the moon isn't seeing eye to eye with Venus in Gemini, which is a whole other bag of tricks, but let's just say on the surface, Venus in Gemini can represent surface relationships, options, choices, maybe being a little social, kind of keeping our options open. And it really wants to keep things light. It likes to be fun. It likes to be flirty. But the moon in Scorpio does not want those things. The moon in Scorpio is like, show me your soul, like, show me you're committed, you know, tell me your secrets, like, let me feel safe and vulnerable. And Venus in Gemini is like, ick, you know, too deep for me. And then we've also got Saturn in Aries, which is about that personal responsibility, accountability, holding our head strong, staying kind of the path. And obviously it recognizes, I think through the inconjunct, one of the positives is that if we are strong, if we are self-reliant, if we are sticking to our plan, to our program, and focusing on personal accountability, not only is it going to be seen as strength physically, but it can also be seen as strength emotionally. And Scorpio moons are strong. They're little warriors. So the yod is very interesting, and I can't ignore that. To me, it's very loud. It's basically saying that, you know, there is this karmic kind of configuration. And okay, Venus is going to be about relationships and values and communication when it's in Gemini. It's sextile Saturn in Aries. So this is about structure and commitment. And they're both in conjunct that Scorpio moon. So the yod of the moon is saying that this is the release point for fated adjustments. So it's pointing really to a profound kind of emotional pivot around love, worth, and responsibility, Venus, Saturn. And I'm expecting this full moon to bring kind of like destined turning points that require some kind of precise realignment in maybe how we merge emotionally versus maintain independence. And like that, Aries is just very much on its own, but Scorpio wants to kind of melt together. So that also means that Venus and Saturn are in a sextile, which I like. I like that. I mean, this means that yes, we can be fun, flirty, and open-minded, but also, you know, maybe we're bringing in better love, better relationships, stronger values, and opportunities to learn and travel through personal kind of commitment or our own personal kind of will. So I like that aspect. I think it's great. We're going to be seeing that the moon is also going to be in a slight trine to the North Node in Pisces. So we've kind of got like a water trine here, although it's a little too wide with Jupiter. But when the moon's trining the North Node, there is something that's kind of like fateful that's happening. The evolutionary kind of connection to the North Node really represents our soul path. So emotional transformations, moon and Scorpio, moving through shadow work is now supporting our destiny. And the North Node in Pisces is about healing, compassion, but it's also about release. So anything that's connected to spirituality, collective healing, all of this stuff feels very kind of fated and supportive for kind of moving towards our highest purpose. Now we also see another nice aspect with Venus, which is interesting. We see that Venus is within range of a conjunction to Uranus. So it's about 9 degrees. So it's getting kind of loose, but sudden changes in money, resources, value, style, relationships. And Venus not only sextiles Saturn, but it's also trining Pluto. So the actual trine will happen a couple days prior, right at the end of April. But that's about big transformations in love and money. So likely what we'll find is that, this is very harmonious, it's very social, it's very empowering, and love, values, and communication with Venus and Gemini is really flowing quite beautifully with like deep transformation and kind of collective power, right? Pluto and Aquarius. So this supports innovative, authentic shifts in relationships, finances, as well as, what we value. So it's turning intensity into regenerative kind of connection. I think this is going to equate to big market news, especially for individuals who are probably investing in tech, things that are connected to AI, things that are connected to media. There could potentially be some big breakthroughs with some of this stuff kind of like leading up to the full moon in Scorpio. So it's interesting to see like the ruler of the sun in some pretty nice aspects, sextile Saturn and trine Pluto. So, Pluto rules Scorpio, Venus rules Taurus. Through open communication, learning, socializing, networking, we can actually work together through some of the challenges that are kind of going on and happening. But I also think that like with, the moon square Pluto and Mars conjunct Saturn, it's like, it's not looking as positive for some of the Scorpio issues. It's almost like there's going to be problems, and then there's going to be people who are going to go, I've got a friend for that, or, I've got, this connection, or I'm working on this problem and we're trying to solve it. And then you're gonna have other people that are gonna still be running around with their heads cut off, kind of being like, yeah, but the problem. This is a full moon that you wanna be focused on the solution, not the problem, because we can get so hung up on the problem that it's gonna be harder for us to actually kind of band together and kind of see our way through it. Now here's another ouchie. We've got Mercury in Aries conjunct Chiron in Aries at 27. So this is a Gemini degree. And Mercury is associated with the South Node in Virgo, where we can be too nitpicky, too hard on ourselves, changes with jobs, changes that are also going on with health and habits and routine. And Mercury conjunct Chiron spells out to me that there is going to be news that is probably going to be released sometime around the time of this full moon that could be not only jaw-dropping, but very damning in regards to mental health, in regards to physical health. Lots of changes that are going to be probably happening when it comes to mental health standards. Medications could be one of them. So I think there's going to be some news and some data and statistics that are coming out about what we're taking for mental health, or what we're consuming, or even what we're watching, and like the negative effects of it. In particular, how it could be, food that's, harming our psychological health, or where medications are actually really not good for digestion, or maybe it's not good for fertility. And that's all like kind of like the Scorpio stuff that's kind of coming up. Aries obviously deals with military. It also is connected to men and masculinity. And Mercury conjunct Chiron is just quite literally, this bold communication that's meeting the wounded healer. So the conjunction really kind of brings up healing through direct, courageous speech. That's the positive here. Hey, you hurt my feelings, and I did not like it. And this is how it felt. And, it made me very insecure or kind of critical, or the need to be kind of nasty or overcompensate. And I'm bringing all of that up because this is ruled by Mars, which is conjunct Saturn. So there could be some people who are like, I don't like the way that made me feel. And like, I'm not going to tolerate that. And there's nothing wrong with saying those things. I think that may actually kind of come up. And I think a lot of people are going to have breakthroughs in terms of their own personal identity. And there could be some major breakthroughs going on in therapy offices with that full moon in Scorpio. But it's also kind of saying that there's going to be identity wounds that are kind of coming up. And it can also be just connected to past hurts. So wounds, can be formed by words, sticks and stones, right? That words can actually hurt us under this full moon. And there can also be like, words that we're using to kind of cut through illusions about ourselves. And we can use them to kind of facilitate, I think profound personal and relational repair. With that being said, it's still important to be mindful of what we're saying, how we're talking to ourselves, how we're talking to other people. Scorpio full moons are notorious for kind of bringing out the worst in ourselves and in others. I hate to say that, but I have a lot of Scorpio placements. I've noticed that personally, that when the Scorpio full moon comes in, I'm like, yep, if it's smack dab on a planet, you're definitely going to get the intensity of that planet's kind of punch. Naturally, the moon, the nature of the moon is more internal. So it's like almost like that animal instinct that you don't always see. That's why when you look at a natal chart, you know, people are going to look like their rising sign. They're going to act like their sun. But when you get to know them, you start to really see their moon. Scorpio moons are not known for showing their moon. They're intensely private, very sensitive, very passionate, and sometimes can have trouble kind of like opening up and like sharing their inner world with people. And then when you get to know them, you get to see that they're like very deeply devoted, very intuitive, very wise, but they have their guard up, right? And so I think between Mars and Saturn, and also the moon, a lot of people are going to have their guard up, and it's going to be situations where people are going to say to each other, well, I look strong, or I've had a good kind of game face, or, you know, I seem capable or independent, but really I'm just like mush on the inside. And like, hi, this is the wound that I've been dealing with and I've been trying to soldier on. But, you know, even the bravest soldiers have their roughest days. And so I think that we will probably see some of that stuff that's coming up. Saturn and Neptune are sextiling each other. So, Saturn and Neptune are sextiling Uranus. I take that back. They're kind of coming out of the conjunction now. It's going to get wider and wider as the year kind of goes on. So we're seeing now where there is like reworking our own personal vision and how we see ourselves and our goals. And that's really connecting with Uranus, which is about kind of lightening up. It can also mean that there's new ideas, new ways of communicating, new ways of traveling. And we see on the other end of this, Neptune is still kind of in a sextile with Pluto. So we see this bi-sextile that is kind of starting to merge. And you'll see that even more as we get into the summer when Uranus is moving further and further into Gemini. That's pretty much all of it. I would just say with like, you know, Saturn and Neptune sextiling Pluto, this is supportive. So it's really kind of saying new structured ways of seeing ourselves, new spiritual practices, Saturn, Neptune, that it's helping kind of build, you know, practical visionary realities from collective change, Pluto and Aquarius. And so maybe we're blending kind of discipline with inspiration for long-term empowerment, but that's not specific just to this moon. This is something that's been kind of in the skies off and on for some time, and it'll continue later into the year. But man, can't take my eyes off that yod. Something about this makes me feel like there is going to be some radical changes that are going to be happening financially around the world. And it's going to be showing some people where they just need to be more diligent and they need to be finding new ways to kind of learn about money, finances, the future of markets, things like that. So that way they're prepared. Generally, we see when there's full moons, there's like peak periods in the markets, and the markets are generally kind of going up. And so what I'm thinking is like with Venus trine Pluto, for some people, they're going to go, yeah, this is a crisis, but I'm going to turn it into an opportunity. So if things are breaking down, then some people are going to jump in versus others who are going to kind of have a knee-jerk reaction to things. And they're going to be like, oh my God, this is breaking down. Like, what do I do? So be careful trying to time the market with some of this stuff. I have found that the financial signs are quite literally Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So everything is getting triggered but Leo. We see the sun in Taurus, which is more about banks and institution and bonds. Moon in Scorpio is going to be more dealing with like debt and issues with liquidity and things connected to taxes. And then Aquarius is going to be dealing more with like what's going on with everybody collectively. So looking at the sun coming out of a square with Pluto, the moon coming out of a square with Pluto, you know, I'm filming this on like the, I don't know, I think it's like the 18th or something, the 19th of April. There could be some real kind of blood in the streets, in the market over like the next like week or two. And I know it's been at all-time highs from what I understand. Like it went like way up recently, but it can only go so far. And so I'm wondering, is this going to be people reacting, consumers reacting to prices to things? Is this going to be that there is some, you know, sudden kind of breakthrough, or there is some AI stock or something that's connected to tech that's kind of running? I can only speculate. Now for world predictions, let me just say this. Moon square Pluto is generally, when that's baked into a full moon, it's going to bring up some intensity, and also the yod as well. So it's going to be spotlighting hidden power structures and kind of like, I think, faded diplomatic shifts. And I also think about the embassy ball, right? That Sabian symbol plays out, and it talks about international maybe negotiations where protocol kind of masks intense transformations. And then the Mars-Jupiter square brings tension between kind of assertive leadership and emotional or national security needs. So we can see some kind of rising tension around that period. The Pluto square the moon and Venus trine Pluto could definitely spark some social movements, especially around intimacy, trauma, sexuality, and equality. And the Yod kind of suggests that there could be a turning point when it comes to collective values and relationships. And then Mercury conjunct Chiron can be like really helping voices of the wounded rise and, be healed kind of like publicly. In terms of like economic systems, anytime we see full moons in the Taurus Scorpio axis, there is some kind of regenerative shift. The positive is that Venus and Pluto, which rule the sun and also the moon, they're in a trine. So I could see that this is like positive changes when it comes to investments, taxes, and like wealth distribution. And that square to Pluto is going to be about energy. And so it's kind of supporting the Saturn-Neptune sextile, which can bring practical yet, I think, visionary adjustments that can be kind of coming up to financial systems. Now, we can see some home and family challenges just to the nature of like the Mars-Jupiter square. So I would say try to lean into this moon trine Jupiter if you can, because that's going to help us expand emotional security, and it's really great for family healing. But with Mars and Jupiter in a square and the Yod creating pressure, it's around making adjustments around home and family responsibilities versus our individual drive. I've seen this a lot in my own life. I've been like, okay, well, do I want to, like play it safe, stay somewhere that's like comfortable and like familiar, or like, do I want to venture out there and like go and take a risk and like move somewhere else or like live, in another place? So I can only speculate that other people are kind of feeling some of the same effects, where there is this like kind of personal need and need for adventure versus kind of like wanting to stay somewhere that's like familiar. Or if you guys are feeling like you need more independence and you're wanting to venture away, but you have home or family responsibilities, and it's like easier said than done. Now, technology and values, I think, are going to come up a lot with Venus trine Pluto, and it can be great for breakthroughs when it comes to tech and healing, as well as communication and emotional empowerment. And Mars in Aries is good for pioneering new energy and like innovations as well. And I think that Yod is definitely going to be emphasizing, just in general, a soul level kind of cultural evolution. And it's going to be, I think, around vulnerability, power, as well as intimacy. And connecting that Sabian symbol, it suggests that we can do this gracefully if we, maybe find ways to be open to transformation. So this could be like through art, through media, relationships, all kind of reflecting a deeper kind of strategic rebirth. Now, I am going to take you guys through the full moon for the 12 signs in just a second. But just generally, I would say the personal effects that we're going to see from this is, for me, like a full moon in Scorpio is always a time where I see a lot of clients that are like, oh, I've been dealing with this secret, or like there's been like this underlining thing that I've like needed to address, and like now it's coming up. And if you find that you've been holding on to something, so be that a secret, or maybe there's been a power imbalance, or maybe there's been a lot of intimacy issues, we want to work with this. We want to look at, the moon squaring Pluto as an opportunity through the pressure to recognize that it's really demanding us to have radical honesty and release. And that Yod that we're seeing with the moon and with Saturn and with Venus is kind of signifying that there is going to be a fated karmic kind of pivot. Now, Venus and Saturn create tension, but it's forcing that kind of precise emotional adjustment. And that's around, I think, love, values, commitment, as well as independence. So Venus in Gemini is great for just kind of like being a little bit more open when it comes to communication and like talking about things and making things a little bit more light, especially in some of the more intense moments. And I like that Saturn is sextiling Venus, where it's just like individuals are going to have to actually take action to communicate, tell people what they love, what they value, what they need. And really, that's going to be the key to deeper intimacy. It's not about physicality. It's going to be more about communication, learning, and kind of sharing with people. I also really love that the moon's like trining the North Node on Jupiter. I think that that's going to bring a lot of grace. There's going to be more opportunity for expansion, soul alignment, and helping us grow through the intensity rather than just getting stuck in it. Yes, there is quite a bit of air and fire in the sky, but I'm looking at Jupiter, the moon, and also the North Node. Like, this is quite watery. So if you're like an air or a fire sign, I think that you guys might do a little bit better than usual because of some of the Aries and the Gemini, but still you can feel like you're getting in your feelings. So this is about helping us grow through the intensity rather than feeling like it's just kind of dragging us down. And then Venus trine Pluto can be really harmonious when it comes to transformation in relationships, as well as self-worth. and that Chiron, kind of Mercury is going to help us, well, have healing conversations. So ultimately, the Scorpio full moon that's taking place, we're being asked to really kind of balance personal security with deep emotional merging and release. That's the opposition. And then we're confronting power dynamics and hidden truths with courage because the moon squares Pluto. We're making these fated adjustments in relationships and values through the odd, and we're channeling discipline and action while navigating around emotional expansion. Remember that we want to align some of these transformations with our soul path, and that's just because the moon's trining the North Node. And if we can communicate some of our wounds boldly, it's only then that we're able to heal. And it really wants us to focus on kind of building practical dreams amid some of the kind of collective change that's going on. I think the inconjuncts can be a little bit of like a stinker, but I also know that it can remind us that if we need to kind of tweak our impulsive reactions so that way they support rather than kind of sabotage, our emotional depth in particular. And overall, I think that this is a powerful kind of portal for rebirth, and whatever is kind of dying off during the full moon in Scorpio, it's transforming into something that's going to be more authentic and also more empowered. Now, I gave you guys some ideas for what to do under the full moon in Scorpio, but I would say that yod is really about adjustments. So maybe it's a good idea to kind of meditate on what needs to change, what you're open to adjusting. And so journaling about that. It can also mean that we're kind of like visualizing this energy of like scales where we're kind of adjusting something and kind of speaking our intentions and being open to transformation, I think is key. Shadow work is wonderful during a full moon in Scorpio. So if we use this energy, we can write down all the things we've been afraid of, all the things that have been bothering us, the things that we're ready to release, and we can burn it. Save your intentions for the next moon, which will be the new moon that we're going to have in Taurus in a couple weeks' time. And we're going to be kind of burning and clearing things out over the next couple weeks until we get to that. It's also wonderful to just do anything to ritualize reclaiming your power. I love working with obsidian or garnet whenever we have a Scorpio full moon. Maybe that's going to be helpful to maybe navigate, the square to Pluto and Aquarius. And it's really about reclaiming our personal power and saying that out loud. Maybe it's about kind of anointing ourselves while we're kind of affirming some of these, changes that we're making or some of these things that we're kind of letting go. And above all, I think there's going to be a lot of like really deep healing conversations under this full moon. So if you have to write a letter to yourself or to someone else, maybe you have to kind of speak, your truth that you've been kind of hiding or concealing. A lot of like cathartic release happens under a full moon in Scorpio. So that's what I recommend. As for working with crystals and herbs and all that stuff, herbs that are associated with Pluto or Mars are going to be ideal, right? Or Scorpio. So something I always like to do during a Scorpio full moon is I always pick up a pomegranate. I love to have pomegranates. I'll put it on an altar space, or I'll, have some pomegranate seeds or some juice. And that's for depth. That's also good for fertility work. It's good for like that connection to like the underworld and like really purging and bringing everything out. But basil is really wonderful. It's associated with Scorpio. That's for protection and prosperity, and it really aids transformation. Mugwort is also really good too. So mugwort tea. So if you're going through like a lot of stress, if you're going through a lot of changes, if you're kind of clearing things out, or if you're just feeling like you're just more vulnerable, more raw, I love mugwort tea for that. I was watching a video the other day where somebody was discussing like all of like the sacred herbs that were used by Native American tribes. And when people were like going through periods of like grief where they lost someone, they're dealing with, major emotional issues, maybe they're just feeling depressed, maybe they are dealing with any kind of otherworldly things. Like when mothers were birthing babies, like they would give them mugwort because they believe that this would stimulate and open things up in your subconscious that would kind of help you purge and work through things in your sleep and kind of aid the soul. Can't say enough good things about that, but it's also really great for psychic insight and for kind of like dream assessment. So mugwort's good. Cinnamon's good too for courage and working with that Aries energy. And I also like myrrh. Myrrh is wonderful for like getting all like the stickies and everything out of your space under a full moon in Scorpio. It's good for purification and also like ancestral connection. As for crystals, anything dark is good to go. So obsidian is something that I love. I love working with smoky quartz during a Scorpio full moon. Garnet also is really great. Sometimes even bloodstone I'll use, especially because we have a lot of Aries in the sky. But also malachite's wonderful for emotional transformation. And like whenever I'm going through a lot of changes, it's so weird. Like I just naturally will gravitate towards malachite, and I will either buy a piece, I'll keep a piece on me, I'll wear it. And I have found that it's really helpful for just when my life is going through a lot of change. But labradorite can be really good too, because this is a stone for psychic protection and also like magical rebirth. If you want to work with essential oils, blends, or incense, I recommend using patchouli because it's very grounding. It's going to help with that Taurus moon. Frankincense is good for spiritual protection. And I also like using cypress or black pepper because this is good for transition and letting go and having the courage to do so. The colors that are associated with Scorpio are always going to be deep red or black. Sometimes maroon or burgundy is another color that you can use. And these are all just if you're using altar cloths, if you're buying candles or anything like that, the kind of colors that you want to be working with. Now, what I do recommend during this full moon is just take a deep breath, because the emotions can be really deep, they can be really intense, and embrace whatever fated adjustments are coming your way. Likely the area of where the full moon is pointing to that adjustment, but it has something to do with Gemini as well as Aries in your chart. So you have to look at those two houses. Have deep, honest conversations that can heal with anybody or everybody, that are in your life. And it can even include yourself, and be focused on releasing what is no longer serving you and really kind of trust in that, because there's a lot of supportive water trines that are going on, and you should just notice that like emotional catharsis from clearing everything out. Try to channel the Mars-Saturn energy into discipline focus, and that focus should be tied to personal transformation. And do your best to also celebrate some of the emotional growth and the intuitive expansion that's kind of coming in. But what you don't want to do and what you want to watch out for is ignoring the signals that are coming where we have to make this adjustment. For some of us, that's going to kind of hit us out of left field. We're not going to see it coming. We also don't want to suppress the intensity or bypass the shadow work, because Scorpio is not going to let that happen. It's going to make us deal with it. And we also don't want to like force outcomes, because there is like a lot of karmic things that are kind of going on right now with aspects to the nodes and also the odd. And we don't want to stay in emotional isolation or stay in secrecy. Now is the time to be like, okay, we're going to come out with it. Take your time. Also, don't make any rush decisions if you can, because I feel like the full moon's going to come in and we're going to have to kind of reevaluate and then integrate. And we'll spend the better part of the next 2 weeks preparing for the next new moon in Taurus, where we're going to set new intentions. All right, so I'm going to take you guys through the 12 rising signs, and I'm going to talk about where this is happening for you. I'm a Western astrologer. That's the kind of astrology that I like to practice. And so I do recommend listening for your whole rising sign to see exactly which house this is going to be taking place in. Then you can listen to your sun sign to see how this is impacting your career, your vitality, or your job. And then your moon sign, which I would listen to because it's a lunation, is going to tell you what's changing for you emotionally or on the home front. You have to listen to all three to get a better understanding of what's going to take place. And I am going to be looking at this from whole signs, but if you're a Placidus user, you just want to look for where 11 or 12 degrees of Scorpio is in your chart. You may have to listen to more than one rising sign just to get the bigger picture of what's going to be kind of playing out for you. Don't forget to take a look at where Mars and where Pluto is, because they are also signaling some of the changes that are going to be kind of coming from this full moon. All right, so we're going to start first with my Aries and my Aries risings. What's up, Aries? Interesting for you, because even though it's in Scorpio, the ruler is in your sign. So I would say Aries takes a close second to importance, other than Scorpios, and I would say Tauruses and fixed signs that are going to be really feeling the effects of this full moon the most. Now, Aries, the full moon's in your 8th house. All right. So this is a house that is naturally kind of like a little behind the scenes. You know, the water houses have a tendency to be a little bit more emotional, spiritual, private, and they're about kind of conclusions and wrapping things up. But for you, Aries, the ruler is Mars, which is in your sign. So this is big for psychological breakthroughs, big personal changes, big emotional changes, and it's highlighting the axis of the 2nd house of your money, values, and resources, and the 8th house of other people's money, values, and resources. So there could be a lot of money in, money out things that are kind of going on. 8th house is usually where bills come due, you know, so paying off debt, dealing with budgeting, things that are kind of connected to big emotional or home or family transformations, as the moon's tied to your 4th house. Now, I'm looking at this yod, between Saturn, Venus, and the moon. And that tells me that it's really activating through the full moon shared resources and intimacy, and there's a lot of faded intensity. You're also going to see that with, the Mars-Saturn conjunction in your first house, it's adding a little bit more discipline, personal drive, but it requires adjustments because of the inconjunct. My thought on this is that there's going to be transformations in joint finances or emotional merging that feels karmic for you. I'm also predicting that I think that there's going to be some like deep financial or intimate kind of rebirths and healing conversations that can resolve power issues. The 8th house can be partners' money, insurance, taxes. It can be inheritance. And I do feel like there's going to be just a lot of having to be honest with other people about your financial limits, what you need for support, what you can and cannot afford, what you're paying off, what you owe other people. And you may feel like there is a sense of having to communicate that with others, and be a little bit more kind of, open and honest about that than normal. It may also materialize because it's in conjunct and quincunxing Venus and Saturn that, this will be a conversation that's had maybe with a sibling. Maybe it deals with a financial document. Maybe you're applying for a loan and you're trying to kind of see something that can go through. And it can also be anything that's connected to like financing gadgets, buying cars, expenses revolving around education or trips. And that may be potentially kind of getting highlighted at the time of the full moon. So definitely a little bit more private for you, but you play like a key role in just kind of telling other people what your needs are and making sure that they're being met. So let's take a look and let's see what the cards are for my Aries and my Aries rising. I just wonder, is it like car expenses, moving expenses, car insurance going up, something like that maybe? But let's take a look. So what is the advice from the tarot for Aries for this full moon in Scorpio? Oh, I like that. You get the King of Cups. So keep your eyes out for a water sign, okay? So this could be relationships to people. It could be people you're meeting. But King of Cups can be a Scorpio, Cancer, or Pisces. And this is about kind of like wearing your heart on your sleeve and being emotionally very like mature. And I like that with Mars and Saturn in your first house. It's like you're learning that you can both be strong and vulnerable at the same time. That you don't have to just kind of always have on your war face, that there is a side of you that's softer and you're opening up and you're maybe sharing more and you're being more kind of forthcoming about your feelings, and that it can deepen relationships, okay? So your relationship to another person, your relationship maybe to a sibling. It can also mean that this is opening the door to just like partnerships, which is weird. But the 8th house is the house of merger, right? This is where we really kind of like bare our soul to another person. So be open to being a little bit more emotionally vulnerable and telling people where you're at, and watch for opportunities for people to kind of support you and meet you halfway. So that way your relationships and also potentially even your joint finances, your intimacy can really kind of grow. Good luck, Aries. All right, Taurus and Taurus risings, you guys are going to be experiencing a full moon in Scorpio taking place in your opposite sign, your 7th house of relationships. If you have Taurus, sun, moon, or rising, I would say 10, 11, 12 degrees. Definitely pay attention because this is going to be opposing you, so it can be a little bit bigger. Especially if you're a Taurus having your birthday like around like the end of right at the end of April, or I would say up to about the 2nd of May. This is going to be a big birthday for you. It's kind of indicating everything all year is going to feel bigger. There's going to be bigger changes. Now, the full moon's in the relationship house, so it is bringing up relationship culminations, big changes with relationships, meeting people, defining moments in partnerships. But it can also mean that there's just a lot of things changing for other people. It doesn't necessarily have to be for you. So whether you're partnered or not, you're going to see other people being a little bit more emotional, a little bit more moody, moon in Scorpio. Now, the ruler of this moon is Mars, and it's sitting in your 12th house. So there can be some sense of being like, okay, there is some time away from a partner. Maybe you're traveling, maybe they're traveling. It can also represent that there are some things that are kind of hidden that are coming to light in relationships, some karmic situations that are coming to light in relationships. And if you notice, Venus is actually trining Pluto. So Venus is your ruler. It's in your house of money, and it's going to be trining Pluto. So it tells me that this is actually quite good for you. It's offering kind of this beautiful transformative harmony in one-on-one bonds. And that could be you're on the same, page with your partner with finances. You're on the same page as your business partner. Things are really flowing when it comes to work and also money. There is a yod though. So the yod is going to be in conjunct or quincunx Mars and also quincunx Venus. And this is really kind of demanding some kind of adjustment around commitment and values, possibly having conversations about things that you've been putting off. And maybe there are things that are coming up that's requiring you to kind of work as a team with another person. It doesn't have to necessarily be a romantic partner. It could be a business partner. You could be discussing things with clients. It could also mean that there's just this need to really deepen partnerships. And you're going to be doing that through kind of honest power recalibration. And I think like that graceful release. What can happen during a full moon in your 7th house though? I see people get married. I see people get engaged. I see people, meet significant others. I also see that this can be a turning point where if relationships have not been working for some time, that you can be saying, okay, I'm taking a bit of a break from this. I'm not saying it's over. I'm just saying, give me some space and let me reassess this. And then we'll kind of reconvene. And likely through doing that, you're going to better reassess your values and determine whether or not this is a relationship that's in balance. But I definitely think that this is going to be a big one for you guys in terms of some of that stuff. And some of you guys might have some things that are going on in your private life that might involve your career, your relationships become public. And I say that because the moon is squaring the 10th house. So you might be saying, yeah, I've been dealing with this thing, kind of behind closed doors. And by the way, like we're going our separate ways, and that can happen. Or your partner can be saying that they want to kind of finally discuss some of the things that have been like the elephant in the room. Obviously, I say that as I touch wood, but let's see what comes up for my Taurus and my Taurus risings. What do you guys need to know about this full moon in Scorpio in your relationship house? Wowzers, what a great card. 2 of Cups. I mean, look at this. You can't see it. It's probably too far from you, but I made this deck. This is, this is the relationship deck and a card. And they're standing there and they're cheersing each other and it's a bride and a groom. For me, such a great card to get for the 7th house. I mean, I really feel like even though there can be some doom and gloom having a full moon in Scorpio, in your 7th house and the ruler being in the 12th, I look at this and I'm like, absence can make the heart grow fonder. For some of you guys that are traveling or you're not around your partner, or maybe you just notice that there's a period of time around the end of April, beginning of May that you're working a lot, you're not together, you can't see each other all the time. The time that you guys do have together should be quite sweet, and it should actually be something that's like very rewarding. So some of you guys might have really great things happening in your romantic relationships. Maybe it's something that you've been thinking about for a while that you're wanting to talk to your partner about and it feels challenging or difficult, and then you have a breakthrough and you're on the same page. Maybe you're not looking for love, right? And then all of a sudden the full moon comes through and then you meet somebody, you run into somebody that just totally took you by surprise. Whatever it is, I'm not really predicting doom and gloom for my Taurus and my Taurus risings. I think it's going to be something that's going to be unifying and actually really good in relationships of any kind. People who are willing to basically partner with you and more than meet you halfway. I think you're going to find that, things are actually really evolving and they're having like quite the glow up. So good luck, Taurus. Let me know what happens. For my Gemini risings, you guys are going to have a full moon taking place in Scorpio in your natal 6th house. Interesting for you because this is going to in conjunct or quincunx Venus in your sign. So pay attention, Gemini. But the 6th house is directly connected to your workspace, your pets, your health, your habits. And there's some stuff going on. In particular, I would say what you want to really watch for is that Mars and Pluto are the ruler, right? So it's squaring Pluto, so there could definitely be some challenges when it comes to work scheduling, traveling, making some changes with your health. And you're also going to see that this is going to be making an in conjunct or a quincunx to Mars, as well as Venus in your sign. So it's really, I think, talking a lot for you guys about being like, hey, like pay attention to group dynamics at work, pay attention to your social life and your friends and what is healthy and not healthy in social habits, where you're making more time for your friends, you're making more time for health or for wellness. And it can also, with the Pluto square, kind of reveal some hidden dynamics. Venus is in your sign, okay? So with Venus in your sign trining Pluto, this basically means that there could be regenerative shifts in routines and service, and Mercury is conjunct Chiron. That is what you really want to watch for, because this can indicate that, there is support that can come from community, right? So like, for example, I've seen a lot of Gemini risings that are telling me, I'm looking for a job, I'm trying to find a new job. A full moon in the 6th house can definitely bring that up for you. But with the ruler being in the 11th house, it means that in order to fulfill that, you have to work with a team. There's team building exercises. You're going to networking events. You've got friends or, people who are introducing you to people. You're updating your LinkedIn or anything that's going to be kind of online. And you're having to do your due diligence to kind of like see that through so that way you can be more productive or feel fulfilled at your job. Services that you provide to friends, right? Friends in need, friends who are sick, they might need some support, or maybe you're kind of helping them, take care of like an issue, can definitely come up. And a full moon in the 6th house can definitely show you where work or health protocols are transforming. These supportive trines can bring some lucky breakthroughs for sure, especially with Venus trine Pluto. I think it's going to allow you guys to find solutions if you're wanting to learn something new or if you're wanting to travel. Watch for changes with your schedule, your office space. Watch for changes with your health. A lot of times when you have a full moon in the 6th house, like if there's a health issue going on, it's going to be brought to your attention. And if that happens, it looks like you have friends that are going to be like, hey, we're here for you. What do you need? Or maybe you're just trying to get a little bit more physically active and you're trying to be, taking classes or working out with friends. And that might be part of the change that's kind of coming into your schedule, right? Very interesting, especially when you think about, I think about a lot of Gemini risings, really since last year, there's been a lot of like, I can't stand, working for this company, or I'm having issues with this person at work, or like whatever. And so now it's kind of coming home to roost. So if you're still in those situations, you're really trying to kind of work as a team and work through some of the team building kind of exercises or some of the meetings, so that way you feel like you can actually get your job done. All right, so let's take a look for my Gemini and my Gemini rising. What is the advice that the tarot gives you for this full moon? Great card. You get the Hierophant, which is generally the energy of Taurus. So I kind of have to bring this up, but the Taurus sun is opposing this, okay? So sometimes when you have the sun going through your 12th house, it's about rest and relaxation, taking a step back. You may not feel as social, especially with Mars and Saturn here. And this is about kind of refining your schedule and really making sure that you're just on top of doing everything that you need to do and not saying yes to everything. So you may not be able to say yes to everything because you're like, well, I've got stuff I have to get done. I'm working, I've got like a new health routine. And so this is about being a little bit more conservative and a little bit more diligent with just your time and not like expending too much energy on trying to do everything at once. This can also be talking about focusing on healing and kind of adjusting this clear into the month of May. So it might take a little bit longer, which makes sense. You're going to be working with this energy for the better part of like the next 2 months until we get to the next new moon. Good luck. All right, we have got my Cancers and my Cancer risings. You guys are going to experience the full moon in Scorpio in your natal 5th house. Obviously, if you're a Cancer, kind of like 10, 11, 12 degrees, this will trine you. So I think you guys will like this. And to some extent, even if you're a little bit later than that, it is going to eventually start coming into a trine with Jupiter. So I think Cancers are actually going to like this full moon. For you guys, you're going to see the full moon is in your 5th house of romance, children, creativity, dating, true love, taking chances, self-employment, hobbies. So I really like this for you guys. I think that this is really kind of saying with some of the aspects, it is an opportunity to feel like you're completing a personal project or hobby, or you're launching something that you've created out into the world. Big changes with children or involving children. Certainly some Cancer and Cancer risings can find out that they're pregnant right around the time of this full moon in the 5th house because, well, you're the moon. You're also going to notice that this is trining the North Node in your 9th. So it almost feels like there's something that's like aligning in terms of your philosophy about creativity, love, children, and self-expression. The challenge is that you're going to see that it is in conjunct Mars, which is in your career house, and it's also in conjunct or quincunx Venus, which is in your 12th house. So there can be some unexpected surprises in your love life that you don't see coming, but they could be good. It's not necessarily bad. I just think that you're just trying to navigate, potentially, kind of juggling that with like your work and your routine. Maybe you're trying to juggle this with, kind of dating, but wanting to kind of play it cool and seeing how like the relationship is going before you like kind of go out, tell everybody that you're in a relationship, You can also find that the yacht is just really saying that it's creating tension between having fun and responsibility. But overall, I think growth is very favored. So a full moon here is likely going to bring a creative or romantic venture to kind of like reaching this soul-aligned transformation. Think back to what started happening for you guys last year. If some of you guys started new hobbies, or if you got back into dating, or if you were trying to conceive, maybe there were some new goals that you were kind of focusing on, your own personal joy and creativity. And I remember the oppositions to Uranus in your 11th. So a lot of it was about you going like, well, forget what my friends are doing. Like, what's going to make me happy, and that you've been working on that pretty much ever since then. For those of you guys who are parents or you're focusing on parenting or you're dealing with parents, this can definitely be a theme with the in conjunct to Mars and Saturn. So it can bring up some kind of like childhood wounds or like trauma. And it can also mean that this is a really excellent time to get serious about potentially launching your own business, because it's really putting your creative kind of energies, you know, front and center. So let's take a look. Let's see. What can we tell our Cancer and Cancer risings about this full moon in Scorpio? The card that I get for you is the Strength card, which is a great card. I really like that. I think that this is wonderful because Strength is kind of playing off of what's going on with the sun. And so, you know, the 11th house is like your goals and it's your audience, and the 5th house is like what you actually create. And this tells me that whether it's dealing with a kid or with like with your own business, or potentially even with a relationship, you're really exercising strength by not trying to force things, which is so true, I think, with the in conjunct or the quincunx, you know. And I've seen a number of Cancer and Cancer risings over the last couple of weeks that have been like, I met this new person and it's like going well, but I don't want to jinx it. And like, I don't, you know, want to like, you know, kind of try to rush things. And like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I've been thinking about this up and coming full moon for them. And I was like, well, just, you know, whatever makes your heart sing, you know. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to kind of, you know, go full fledged, you know, you're telling everybody you're in a committed relationship, but whatever feels good, that's the change that you're leaning into. Whatever's going to bring you the most joy, the most romance. And yes, some things you're going to feel like you just still want to kind of protect and you want to savor, you know, before you kind of lose that first falling in love vibe. But I do think that some of you guys who are doing like creative projects too, that there can be a moment of personal fulfillment. And the Strength card is really kind of saying like part of the strength has been that you've been like carrying it this whole way and you're now letting it do its own thing. You're kind of sending it off in the world. You're like, okay, if it's going to be successful, it's going to be successful. It's going to do what it's going to do. Try to navigate relationships, projects, children, all in that way. And what you'll find is that if you're letting something go, it's actually, you know, probably going to stay around and continue to kind of make you happy for a while. Good luck. All right, Leo and Leo rising, you guys are going to have this full moon in Scorpio in your natal 4th house. For you guys, this is the 4th house of home, family, roots, and property, okay? You are one of the signs that I would be like, yeah, get a helmet, because you're going to see that the planets, you know, the moon, Pluto, the sun are all in angular houses. So there's definitely a lot of change happening at one time. Especially, I would say, if you have anything between 4 and like 12 degrees of Leo, because this full moon is definitely going to activate all of those degrees in your chart. Now, a full moon in the 4th house is interesting because the moon's very comfortable there because of its natural kind of association with the 4th house. And what you'll find is that with the tension in the square to Pluto and the opposition to the sun, it's highlighting where there's some big changes happening for you with your home and your family or your private life, your career, your reputation, and your status. And that's being brought on by some pretty dramatic changes that are happening with relationships. That's the square to Pluto. Now, you're also going to notice that with the in conjunct or the quincunx, where the moon is quincunxing Saturn and it's also quincunxing Venus, that, you know, some of the changes that are happening with you emotionally, with your parents, with your home, is getting you out of the house. So it might mean some of you guys are like, hey, I'm thinking about moving. I'm going to be relocating. Maybe it means that you're just traveling. You don't want to spend as much time at home. It could also mean that you're getting by with some help of your friends, and like you're talking to your friends in your community about some of the changes that are happening in your private life. And it's a learning experience for you. You're learning a lot about yourself because of these changes that are happening internally and also kind of within your home. Now, what happens when you have some of these aspects? I mean, perhaps like the Saturn-Neptune sextile Pluto is really supporting kind of like visionary restructuring in relationships. Maybe it's about restructuring your kind of emotional foundations. Sometimes people move, they buy houses, they renovate houses, they have to go back home. There's like a big dramatic kind of change with the family. When you see a full moon here, family secrets that are coming up to be healed, living situations that are going to be shifting through job changes or relationship changes can also be a theme here as well. You had a Mercury retrograde through this part of your chart last year. You know, you had Mars going through this part of your chart last year. So I think some of you guys have been kind of toying with the idea of moving anyway. And so now it's maybe like, now it's maybe time to do that, you know, or you're feeling like you're ready to do that. So you guys will have to let me know what happens. But I really feel like Pluto can either be super helpful in navigating some of like the changes with work or your status and your home. So it could be like getting a reading, talking to a therapist, you know, a very kind of understanding, insightful friend, Aquarius, or partner. But it could also be somebody who's just causing a lot of problems. You know, if you're somebody who's like, well, a relationship has come to an end, therefore, you know, we're selling the house, that would kind of make sense under this full moon. Or somebody's moving in or they're moving out, or maybe it means that you're like, well, you know, there's a lot of job change things that are happening. And so, you know, maybe I'm accepting a job that allows me to move or relocate. And that kind of upsets or kind of, you know, makes a disgruntled partner. You'll see some of those things that could potentially happen. So let's take a look and watch for that balance between work and your private life, because it definitely feels a little tense for you, Leo. But I think that the transformation that's coming is actually probably really good. I mean, I think that this is going to be about getting you out of the house. I don't think you're going to feel bogged down. The card that I get for you is the Queen of Swords, okay? So watch for like Geminis, Aquariuses, Libras. These might be like really prominent people right now. But this is also about channeling that energy of the Queen of Swords. And that could be there's important contracts, there's legal dealings. It could mean that you're having to make an important announcement. Maybe you're going back and forth with a woman in the family about, okay, what are we doing with the house? Are we signing a lease? Are we buying something? You know, am I finding a roommate? Do I have to talk to my sister? Do I have to talk to my siblings? Things like that can be kind of coming up. And it just means that you're just taking a much more stern approach when it comes to how you're defending your home, you know, protecting your family, kind of managing where you're living, and really just sticking up for your feelings. And I think that this is more like the morals of the situation. That's very Mars and Saturn in the 9th house. It's just like, you know I need to say something. I know I need to confront this person, or I know that I need to, you know, make this kind of like statement or sign something important. So watch for that to be coming up around the time of the full moon for you guys, and I hope it's a good one. Definitely let me know what happens, Leo. Your chart is lit up. All right, Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are going to see that you have a full moon in the sign of Scorpio in your natal 3rd. House of the mind, communication, learning, traveling, vehicles, contracts. So these will be some of the themes that you'll see that are kind of coming up. It'll also be bringing up, you know, connections locally can get activated. So like your siblings, your neighbors, and it's highlighting the 3rd and the 9th axis, which is generally about travel, education, learning, and communication. Now, the moon is going to in conjunct and quincunx Saturn, and it's also going to in conjunct and quincunx Venus. So this tells me that there's probably going to be some important documents, conversations, or emails, meetings that are being had that's dealing with changes when it comes to your career and changes when it comes to your joint finances. I love a full moon in the 3rd house to be like, oh, I have something I have to sign, right? As long as Mercury has good aspects, which we'll get to in a second. But Mercury conjunct Chiron makes me feel like there could be some difficult conversations that are being had that require you to go back and forth with your partner about joint finances, should you be making a change with your career, and also if you need to be making an investment or if it involves their money in some way. But communication, local connections, Mercury Chiron in your 8th house is really about empowering, healing, talks around shared resources. Moon in conjunct Mars, right, basically means that it's requiring mindful adjustments. And I'm predicting for some of you guys that there could be like sibling or neighbor dynamics or contracts that come up that are, you know, going to be really important. You just have to read the fine print. And obviously having conversations and being courageous and being honest with other people about where you're at. I love this. This could be a breakthrough for a lot of Virgo and Virgo risings when it comes to just changes in their mindset when it comes to money management, investment, or tackling debt. This could also be a huge breakthrough emotionally or psychologically, and just being more vulnerable with other people. I think for a lot of you guys, you know, you'll see, you know, that this is all about merging. The whole month of like March into April has been about merging, as you've seen Aries season and Mars going through your 8th house. And it can also represent where there's a lot of change and transformation that's going on with you internally. And journaling, you know, talking about some of your changes, sharing some of your insight can be big. Watch for changes with vehicles like car insurance or cost of vehicles, or like debt or loans that deals with cars, moving expenses. And this is a good time to like wrap up any educational things you've been doing, or if you have to finish websites, blogs, podcasts, that kind of stuff can be really good as well. Journaling for self-reflection is something else that I would recommend. So let's take a look and let's see what can we tell our Virgos and our Virgo risings about this full moon. You get the Six of Wands, which is a great card. It's about being victorious, but I also think about the third house, and that could be like you going, yes, you know, like it went through. I submitted something for financing, you know, I submitted a request to get a raise or to change positions. I decided that I wanted to move forward with an investment, and like the Six of Wands is saying, it's going to be successful. So whatever it is that you're trying to do is going to be successful, especially if there's anything that involves media, writing, or learning. If some of you guys are trying to like make some extra money from social media, or if you're trying to make some extra money, you know, through an online website or business, to me, it looks like it'll be something that will pan out. But, you know, you're not going to get the benefits unless you're willing to take the risk, right? And so for a lot of you guys, it's the risk of changing your job, the risk of, you know, investing time, investing money into something. And I would say it looks like it's going to be a risk that's worth taking. Good luck. For my Libras and Libra risings, you guys are going to have a full moon in Scorpio in your natal second house. Obviously, this is the house that deals with values. It can be about your physical body, resources that are getting highlighted, your style, your spending habits, anything like that. So big purchases, big money transitions, things like that can happen under a full moon in Scorpio in this house. And it's highlighting the opposition of the Taurus sun in your eighth, which is going to be more other people's money. Now, you are going to see this is ruled by Mars, and Mars is going through your natal seventh house. So it can just mean that there is more kind of financial decisions, spending, obligations, and things that are connected to stuff that you're doing with or for other people. You know, having to pay for gifts, having to go back and forth with clients to get paid, making sure that, you know, you are discussing any kind of big financial plans or kind of changes, you know, potentially with a partner, with a business partner kind of comes up. Now, I say that because Mars is in your seventh house, and you're going to see that the moon is going to inconjunct or quincunx Mars, and it's also going to inconjunct or quincunx Venus, which is your ruler. So likely for Libra and Libra risings, there's going to be some expenses or some sudden shifts in your values that you're going to not see coming. That's going to be tied to travel, or it's going to be tied to a relationship or a partner. Positive is that Venus and Pluto are still in a trine. So that does tell me that whatever is happening, it's regenerative. It's good for self-worth. It's good for your finances. I just think that that yacht is really kind of focusing on adjustments when it comes to what you truly value, both in relationships, but also when it comes to travel and education. I do predict that financial partnerships might be kind of coming up under this full moon. You know, security mindsets can really kind of rebirth in a very powerful way. And I think of like the inconjunct to the seventh house as like confronting people and being like, hey, like, did you pay this? Like, if you didn't pay this, like, do you need me to pay it? Like, what are we going to do about this bill? It can also mean that you're making some big changes to your relationships and your value system within relationships. So it's a lot of like, well, I don't necessarily value what you value, but like, can we still find ways to kind of meet in the middle? It may be a little tricky, obviously, with having Mars in your opposite sign. So some of you guys might feel like, okay, you know, I want to buy one thing, my partner wants to buy something else, and how do we find ways to kind of meet in the middle so that way we're both happy? And I would say make it be less about things, make it be about experiences, because Venus is in the ninth house and it's sextiling Saturn. So it might mean that you're not kind of spending money on a shiny new object. You guys decide that you potentially want to invest in a trip, or, you know, taking a class together, or some kind of learning experience. And I think that that would definitely work out a little bit better, especially with Venus trine Pluto. So some things are going to be worth spending on. Just make sure that you're on the same page as your partner. And if you're single, then it's a lot of weighing out your options in people that you're dating and kind of meeting and deciding who's a good fit if you guys happen to have the same kind of values in mind. But yes, big purchases, luxury purchases, and expenses definitely come up with a full moon in this house. But it can also give you the opportunity to have like a big money breakthrough, and it can be something that can be really beneficial for you. So let's take a look for my Libras and my Libra risings. What do they need to know about this full moon in Scorpio? Oh, you get the Star card. That's kind of cool. It's also connecting to Aquarius, where, you know, Venus is trining Pluto in Aquarius. This is about healing. This is about healing. This is about being united. This is about wish fulfillment, wishes coming true. So I'm like, okay, like some Libras and Libra risings, like something you've really wanted, like now maybe it's possible you're working with a partner, you're working with somebody to bring about this wish. And it could be you're working with a financial advisor, you're working with a coach, You're really working to kind of like strengthen, your self-esteem. And that's all being reinforced by another person or by a collaboration with another person or like a connection. And the Aquarius card, or the Star card can also talk about after a period of like, turbulence, now something actually kind of comes through and it's like kind of healed and it's renewed, which is great for the Scorpio energy. So I'm thinking like if you've been through some rocky things going on in relationships recently with all this like Mars Saturn energy in your opposite sign, now you might kind of be watching the dust settle and you're like, okay, it's been difficult, but things have actually been stronger. Things have been kind of like fortified through some of the challenges that we have had. So good luck to my Libras. Let me know what happens. Scorpio rising. You guys are going to be having a full moon in Scorpio. So if you have anything 10 to about 12 degrees, Scorpio sun, moon, or rising, you're going to be feeling the effects of this full moon. This is your full moon for the year. So obviously it's kind of tied to this personal kind of, conclusion, completion point. Your identity and your personal rebirth is taking place. And this is wild for you guys because there's aspects to both of your rulers. So the moon is connected to travel, education, your philosophy. So it's not unusual when the moon's going through your first house. You're thinking about traveling, you're learning something, you're going somewhere. But it can also just make you a little bit more emotional, a little bit more sensitive. Now the sun's sitting in your 7th house of relationships and partnerships. So with the sun in opposition to the moon, you can be feeling like there is something kind of brewing in regards to, well, who am I in comparison to my relationship with another person? And sometimes there can be this really strong attraction and pull where somebody shows up. Other times it can be where there's a little bit of space in relationship and you're more focused on yourself. But Mars is the traditional ruler, which is in your 6th house, which is connected to your health, habits, and work. Very close to Saturn. So I think a lot of my Scorpio and Scorpio risings really need to be paying fine attention to their health and their habits, overworking, like burning the candle at both ends, and also simultaneously if you need to be more diligent about your physical fitness to better impact your emotional wellness. Moon is also squaring Pluto. So this looks like it's a personal moment of reevaluation and working through what can feel like a personal crisis of your beliefs. My thought is that with the yod between Venus and Saturn and the moon, you guys are detoxing and clearing out negative emotions so that way you can have better intimacy, security, and vulnerability, and also healthier habits and feel like you can be a little bit better organized and more productive. That's what I'm feeling. It's not unusual though when you see the moon oppose the sun and square Pluto that there is something changing within your relationships that also is like, a deep emotional purge or a home and family purge. Something's going on in a relationship that's bringing up a home or family change or a dynamic, and you're kind of like between a rock and a hard place where you're like, okay, this is how I feel, this is what they want, and like this is like the impact and the change that it's actually going to have on the home. So there's a lot of moving parts here. I do think that, the Pluto square and the yod is like making you the focal point for some of these changes. And it's going to be karmic and it's going to be about self-transformation, but more importantly, how you are transforming your habit and also your joint finances. I would just say try to embody that Sabian symbol, right? Of just being like, okay, I'm graceful, even though I know that there's changes going on at home and there's changes going on in relationships, and don't make it be about those things, make it be about yourself and how you're navigating this personal kind of rebirth that's taking place. I also think that a lot of Scorpio and Scorpio risings are going to find that this is about listening to your instincts when it comes to changing your work or your budgeting or your money habits. And you might play a pivotal role. Your response to change, I think, is going to be about everything. Like changing your job, changing your health, changing relationships, changing joint finances. And this is about leaning into it. Like, don't forget the moon's going to trine Jupiter. So you're learning a lot about yourself in the process. And you're also recognizing that you have to take care of yourself, your mind, your body, and your spirit. 1st house is the body, 6th house is health. So really pay attention to where you're holding on to things, where there's grudges or where there's blocks or like emotional hangups that need to be let go. And it goes without being said, it is possible some of you guys are going to be really showing a big physical transformation. So if you have been working on yourself since that new moon in Scorpio, which was in opposition to Uranus last year, where you were like, okay, relationships aren't working, partners are crazy, what can I change? Physically and emotionally, you're going to now see some of the changes. And some Scorpio and Scorpio risings can find with like a full moon in their sign that can also be an indication of pregnancy. So watch for that as well. But traveling, graduation, learning, teaching with that connection to the moon can also be another indication. All right, so what can we tell Scorpio and Scorpio rising about their full moon? What do they need to know about this lunation? Seven of Cups, which is interesting. I think this is the quincunx, right? I think this is the quincunx because this is like, I don't see things so clearly. Like, where is it coming from? And I've heard from a lot of Scorpios, and Scorpio risings in particular, that have been like, I just have like this really weird health issue and like, I don't know what's going on. You know, that could be the inconjunct or the quincunx to Mars and Saturn, which for a lot of you guys is like inflammation. So tackling it through changing your diet is what I would recommend. Anything that's kind of connected to, heavy metal detoxes, working out more, staying hydrated, also having work and life balance a little bit better, and doing anything that you can to just start building a routine. And then you'll also notice that with the quincunx to Venus, that'll also like really spark a lot of changes in your confidence and also like in your intimate and your romantic life. Seven of Cups is pretty common where you're just like, I'm just confused. Everything's kind of hitting me from all different angles. And you might feel like there's changes going on in your relationship. There's changes going on with work. And you're like, how do I cope? And I would say, listen to your gut, because when things feel unclear, that moon in your sign, especially with the trine in the North Node and Jupiter, is going to be about, okay, tapping into that. This is the direction that I need to go in. Follow that, especially when it comes to making any changes with work or potentially even with your health. Good luck, Scorpio. For Sag and Sag rising, you guys are going to experience a full moon in Scorpio in your natal 12th house. So this is kind of behind the scenes, subconscious. It deals with your sleep, things that you don't see coming, kind of clearing out stuff that's been living kind of like rent-free in your head for a while. And this is about like healing spaces, your bedroom, rest and recuperation. So naturally, you're going to feel like you want a little bit of privacy when you kind of go through this full moon. Now, it is ruled by Mars, which is in your 5th house, which is connected to children, dating, creative projects, and your joy. And it's also connected to Pluto, which is in your 3rd house of the mind and communication and learning. Now, I'm particularly piqued my interest is piqued by the trine that you'll have to Jupiter, your chart ruler, just shortly after this. So it is going to be a big emotional clearing for you. I'm also interested in Mars, the ruler, coming into a square with Jupiter, where there is a lot of take a risk energy, take a chance, make the trade, right? Go on the date, have fun, and a lot of enthusiasm to embrace big emotional and physical or financial change seems to be the theme. But in order to do that, you have to clear out some of the blockages and the fears revolving around, is that a good idea? Can I do it? Am I worthy of love? Am I going to have fun? That kind of stuff is kind of building in the sky. You'll also see the moon in conjunct Venus in your relationship house and in conjunct Mars in your 5th house. Wow. So this is clearing out any doubt that you have about relationship fulfillment, joy, happiness, and togetherness. And it's possible that you have some dreams that are foreshadowing some of the things that might potentially be changing in your love life or in the life of your children, or maybe there's like a creative breakthrough that you might have as well. But I think that this is really kind of like where the subconscious and spiritual sector kind of get lit up. With the moon trine the North Node for you, it's bringing kind of faded healing of hidden patterns. And with Saturn and Neptune that are sextiling Pluto, it's kind of, I think, aiding dissolving old illusions when it comes to learning, creativity, and also love. Now, I'm expecting that there's going to be a karmic release here, and it is about kind of spiritual breakthroughs in your heart space, breakthroughs in your childhood, healing the inner child, and dreams that are going to reveal to you what actually needs to change or die off before you have something new that arrives. I think it's really going to show you like where you're getting in your own way if you're not being authentic when it comes to play or when it comes to romance or when it comes to creativity. What you've been afraid of when it comes to like intimacy in relationships, what you've been afraid of when it comes to taking chances or having fun, and like being able to go, no, we're going to kind of push through that. I'm not going to let it get in the way. And remember that like Saturn and Venus are in a sextile. This is wonderful for strengthening relationships, getting serious about dating, falling in love, bringing in more passion and more commitment to existing relationships. And anything that's been kind of holding you back or making you feel like if you weren't sure, you weren't ready for these things, you're going to help kind of like nip some of those things in the bud. So let's take a look. Let's see what we can tell our Sag and Sag risings with what's going to happen with this full moon in Scorpio in their 12th house. What do they need to know here? The card that I get is the Page of Wands. I definitely think it's about like interacting with the inner child. Like I really think that's what this is about. Even though it's in your 12th house, like the ruler's in your 5th. Any other fire signs, so another Sag and Aries or Leo, it can be connecting with them. But pages are children or childlike, or it's going to be about like exploring with childlike wonder. I always love for Sag risings. I always tell them when you guys have a full moon in Scorpio, especially if the ruler's in the 5th, you guys need to be like off in your own little world to create and paint and play and design and have fun and like just enjoy yourself and create for the sake of creating. That is almost like your like temple or your church. Like that sacred kind of creative time is what you need. If you've been wanting to make more time to refine your skills or to be working on something creatively, I recommend doing that. It can also mean that you're just more aware of some of the changes that are going on that are kind of subtle with your children, and like you feel like, you know, if those of you guys who have adult kids, you might be like, I feel like something's up with them. I'm gonna like contact them and see what's going on, you know, and you might find out that, yeah, they've been kind of going through it. They've been having some challenges, and it's gonna help you connect with them and like kind of give them some direction and also strengthen the bond. But continue to be creative and explore some of that. Allow yourself to have some free time where you're not gonna be bothered to do those things. And I think it can be very therapeutic for you guys during the full moon. Get some extra rest and take care of your health too. All right, and we've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. You guys are going to be having this full moon in Scorpio in your natal 11th house, which is good for friends, community, parties, networking. You know, there can definitely be a gathering or a group that you're joining or a presentation that you're giving with this full moon. It is highlighting the axis of Taurus in your 5th house of what you create and then share with others. And the ruler is Mars, which is very close to Saturn, your chart ruler, in the 4th house. And what you're going to notice is that the moon is in conjunct both kind of like Saturn and Mars. So likely there's going to be some unexpected maybe some reprieves from friends to get out of feeling like you're stuck at home or you're in a funk, or you might have a friend that's like, hey, just like come over, we're all getting together, and you're like, thanks, I've been like taking care of my kids all day, or like I've been dealing with like this home renovation, or somebody who's going to give you like a lifesaver basically to get out of some of like the heaviness of what's been happening in your 4th house is kind of what I think. The moon's also going to in conjunct or quincunx Venus. So it is saying if you've been looking for a break from work or your routine, it looks like getting some time with your friends and kind of trusted pals is exactly what the doctor ordered. For a lot of you guys, you're also going to be feeling the moon that's going to be squaring Pluto, which can also put a little bit of pressure where you're like, yes, I want to go out and I want to do things, but also money feels a little tight, or you're being a little bit more conservative with your spending. And it can show you where it's exposing some drama in friends or group dynamics. Now, Venus trine Pluto, on the other hand, I think is really kind of transforming your social values and connections. Great for networking. It's also really great for getting your health in order, you know, bringing in more work or flexible work as well. And I'm predicting for a lot of you guys with the full moon that's going to be in Scorpio that community or friendship shifts feel destined and also like regenerative. So, you know, this can also just be a time where you're just having like catch up time with friends on a call, and then they're like, okay, this is what's changing and this is what's happening and this is what's going on. And you're like, oh my gosh, like I've been really out of the loop. You know, I've been so consumed with what's been going on with me or my family that like I didn't realize that, you know, so many things were kind of happening. Okay, great. I want to make time to see you guys. Let me adjust my schedule, you know, and like check in with the fam, you know, to be able to make this happen. The 11th house is also goals, okay? So I think about last year when there was like a Mercury retrograde and like you had the new moon there. If your goal was to join an association, start a group, if you were trying to, you know, focus on reassessing your goals, or, you know, where you could be making changes with some of your professional goals, likely this is the time where you're seeing it all kind of come full circle. And it's calling you to go and kind of like reconnect with community to be able to really make the most of this energy. So I would really encourage you guys, really for the first like 2 weeks of May, say yes to the invitations, go to the parties, go to the gatherings, get out of the house, be willing to kind of shimmy out of some of your schedule requirements, so that way you can get some time to kind of connect with people who I think are going to be really helpful in kind of brightening your mood. And you'll really see which friends have your back if you've been going through some kind of trying times. All right, so for Capricorn and Capricorn rising, you guys get the Ace of Cups. Love this for you, which is cool because like the sun's in the 5th house of romance. So for some of you guys, it can mean that you're like, oh, I go to a party, I end up meeting with somebody, boom, you know? It can also mean that just the love for your friends, the commitment to your community is exactly what you need. And I really think that with the in conjunct. I think that some of you guys might recognize that you're not alone, that you have people who support you. You just have to reach out to them. You have to let them know, hey, I've been kind of going through it. Could, you know, use a friend. And they'd be like, of course, come over, let's do something. And there could be family obligations, or there could be like family gatherings that could be going on too with this, or that there could be things that you're like, I just can't quite get out of the house, but you know, hey, I'll make dinner, why don't you come over type of vibes. You're gonna find ways to be able to kind of balance your kind of home and domestic responsibilities with being able to find time for your friends. And like that renewal of the relationships with them looks like it's incredibly therapeutic and very important. So good luck, Capricorn. For Aquarius and Aquarius rising, you guys are going to see that you're having a full moon in Scorpio, which will be taking place in your 10th house of your career. If you're like 10, 11, 12 degrees of Aquarius, this will be squaring you by sign. And to some extent, it is also squaring Pluto in your sign. So be mindful that there's a little bit of pressure on you to change or transform something significant. Now, a full moon in the 10th house is important because this is about a culmination when it comes to your career, your public image, your kind of public standing that you have been working on since last year. And last year there was retrogrades there under the new moon. So I think a lot of you guys were going, well, I want to go back to work, or I want to change direction, or I want to retire, or I'm wanting to maybe go back to school. Something happened then, and like now it's coming full circle for you. Launching businesses, starting new jobs, giving proposals, making big announcements is all kind of the territory of a full moon in the 10th. And it's balancing out the home kind of domestic stuff, what's going on with family, and you're kind of really having to pull yourself out of that and focus more on what's going on in professional life while you're balancing things that are kind of happening at home. Now, what's important is that not only do we see the moon square Pluto, where you might feel like you have to undergo, you know, a little bit of like personal sacrifice to be willing to put work first, but the moon's also going to in conjunct and quincunx Saturn and Mars. And Saturn is one of your rulers traditionally. So makes it difficult, I think, when it comes to giving presentations, finding the right words, you know, having meetings. Like communication might feel like it's a little jumbled. And you're also going to see with with Saturn and Venus sextile forming a yod to your 10th house that there's likely going to be a moment for you to like be in the spotlight. It might be about something that you say, something you write, something you've created. It can also mean that you have to be a little bit more stern and a little bit more of an authority figure with your kids or with like people at work. And I could definitely say for some of you guys, just it's intense, but it's empowering, right? And I really think that the sextile that we see also between Saturn and Neptune in your 3rd house to Pluto in your sign is about creating this kind of like visionary professional structure, how you communicate what you have to say, how you're kind of like getting the word out about things that you're working on. So it's going to highlight your reputation or your authority roles, and it's also kind of transforming through this more authentic depth that's kind of going on with your mind and how you're kind of communicating and connecting with other people. A great time for interviews, great time for submitting resumes, great time for trying to get in front of people and make proposals. I mean, some of you guys are going to be thinking about potentially launching something, so something you've written or something that you're working on with media. And I really love that, you know, Venus is so close to Uranus in your 5th house because you're going to have fun with it. It's going to be creative, and it's trining Pluto. It almost looks like you're kind of trading in something that's been more structured and kind of traditional and things that have been kind of more rigid for, ooh, what does it look like to do something more creative? What does it look like to do something that's more independent or something that's going to be more for yourself? Especially I'm seeing a lot of you guys that are getting involved in writing or media or things that are just going to be more creative and cerebral. And you might be making an announcement that you're kind of like segueing some aspect of like the work that you're doing. So watch for that moment to kind of get that out in the air and have fun with it with Venus trine Pluto and Venus so close to Uranus. All right, so what can we tell Aquarius and Aquarius rising about this full moon in Scorpio? What do they need to know? You get the Queen of Wands, okay? Love this energy for you. With Mars conjunct Saturn, there is like some sassiness, there's a lot of confidence, there is a sense of being like look at what I'm doing. Look at what I've created. Like, you know, like I'm running the show. And it can mean that there's fire signs that come into play. So Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius can definitely play a role here. But I think you're channeling the energy of the Queen of Wands, where you're just very direct and very serious about what you're creating. That's very much the sextile. You're very serious about participating in something that you're passionate about, something that you love, and perhaps making that kind of statement to the world, or sharing something that you have been working on, that you've been working hard on, and the positive kind of changes that that can kind of have to your career and also your status that will then follow. So good luck, Aquarius. I hope it's a good one for you guys. We've got Pisces and Pisces rising. You guys are going to see that this is a full moon in the sign of Scorpio, in a fellow sister water sign in your 9th house. Some slight trines to the North Node in your sign, but if you have anything 10 through 12 degrees of Pisces, this will be trining you, so I think you guys will like it. You're also one of the signs that's going to get a grand water trine throughout the full moon if you're a Pisces sun, moon, or rising. So lots of feeling very kind of connected, very creative. Things feel also like very divine. Now, when the full moon comes through in your 9th house, this can be a time when you're traveling. This can be a time of graduation, ceremonies, meeting with mentors or teachers, publishing and legal matters. All those things can kind of come up here, and that's getting highlighted through the opposition to the sun in your 3rd house. Now, oftentimes when, you know, the moon's going through your 9th, you're on an airplane, you're traveling, you're going somewhere. So that might be happening, revolving around the time of the full moon. But this is also going to be really highlighting Mars, which is in your 2nd house of money. And it's in conjunct in quincunx Mars. So it's almost looking like some Pisces and Pisces risings are going to go, okay, there are some things I have to spend money on. Like I have to pay for my, you know, my school fees. I have to pay legal fees. I have to, you know, book a flight. And you might feel like money is kind of tight, but there are some things that are worth spending money on, especially if it's going to bring you joy, creativity, travel. It can also mean that through the in conjunct to Venus and also to Saturn, that it's saying like you're having to travel potentially to visit family, okay? So you might be visiting a sibling, you might be visiting a family member, you might be paying for somebody to come and visit you. That could be another way of looking at it. And really, I think that this is about kind of aligning with the North Node. So if you're meant to be traveling, if you're meant to be having fun, if you're meant to be creating, that's what's supposed to be happening during the time of this full moon. The Venus and the Pluto, you know, trine, I also like a lot because I feel like this is going to be really beneficial when it comes to transforming your relationships with family. It can also mean that there is some kind of like international or educational partnerships maybe that are kind of evolving through soul level insight that comes from this particular full moon. But go back and think about what you were kind of planning last year. You know, were you planning on going back to school? Were you planning on publishing a book? Were you debating whether or not you were going to relocate somewhere further away? I can't quite, you know, get away from the in conjunct to Venus and also Saturn. I feel like that some of you guys are finally making some big moves. Or you might be like relocating places, or you're finally, you know, going off to college, or maybe you're going to be reassessing, you know, if you could potentially live in another city or another country for like a period of time. And I think it could be really good for you guys. I just know that with Mars conjunct Saturn, you might feel like, ooh, it's a little bit more than I want to spend, you know, or it's a little bit more time dedicated to this than I want to spend. But trying to lean into the trine with Jupiter and know that if it's expanding your joy, your creativity, if it's giving you more opportunities for romance, for having fun, some things are going to be worth spending money on. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm missing. No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it. And I also think that there can be legal things that are kind of connected to property and home as well that can be coming up with that in conjunct to the moon. So be mindful of that. I love that Pluto trine though. I think that's going to be like very insightful for you, especially when it comes to the changes that need to happen within relationships and also the home. So let's take a look. Let's see, what can we tell our Pisces and our Pisces risings about, ooh, that full moon in Scorpio. This jumped out. You got the 7 of coins. I love this. This is about the fruits of your labor, right? So if you see this card, you see like a man kind of tending to his crops and everything's kind of growing. And I've said to some of my Pisces recently, I've said, well, what are you working for? Like you're working hard, you're saving money, you're doing what you can do, but A lot of you guys are going, well, I'm saving for this thing. You know, I want to go on a trip later this year. I want to be able to get into this program. I want to be able to buy a car, you know, whatever it is. And I've told all of you guys are working hard for something. Like, it's okay to reap some of the fruits of your hard work. And if you have the opportunity to say yes to, you know, going on a trip, or if you have the opportunity to say yes to investing in education or investing in something that's really going to broaden your horizons, I recommend doing it, because I think it's going to be really beneficial for you guys with that trine that you will see later the next day to the moon and Jupiter. And I also think that this is going to be something that is going to be very transformative for you. So some of you guys who are like, I want to go on a retreat, or I want to go away and take this program, and, you know, I'm going to travel and, like, you know, go and get certified, I would be like, totally do it. Yes, save money to be able to do it, but it's worth making that investment because it's going to be beneficial for you in the long run. So I hope it's a good one, and I hope you guys blow all of your cash going somewhere that you've always wanted to go, because that's kind of the vibe that I get looking at this. All right, guys, well, that is the full moon in Scorpio. Obviously, it is requiring all of us to really master this emotional alchemy. And there's gonna be a lot of faded adjustments, and obviously we're gonna see a rebirth on the other side. But I think that really it's about creating like a portal where, you know, things are kind of dying off and we're bringing something new that's more powerful, better aligned with our soul's path in. So whatever gets illuminated around the beginning of May, I think is going to be quite profound. And obviously we're all kind of like learning to kind of navigate this depth through the Sabian symbol with diplomatic grace, and also emerge renewed. So thank you guys so much for watching, for liking, commenting, and sharing. If you guys find these lunar reports informative and helpful, please do consider sharing on your socials. While you're there, follow me on X at BTV Astro for more of my astro ramblings. If you guys want to book a personal reading with me, or if you want to get a personal transit calendar, check out the links below and head over to beyondtheveiltarot.com. I'm always happy to connect with you guys. I am booking in like July and August right now, so if you know you have a birthday coming up over the summer, definitely consider getting on my books. And if you guys want to learn astrology, check out my courses. I have several courses that I teach on not just astrology, but on tarot as well. With that being said, I hope to catch you guys soon. Just as a reminder, I'm putting this out there just in case I have jury duty. So I'm actually filming this on Sunday because I don't know if I'm going or not yet. So this is coming out on Tuesday, fingers crossed that we have a video on Thursday. I'm sending all the good vibes to make sure that that happens. But for whatever reason, if it doesn't, check the community tab just so you guys can be updated if there is any changes to the schedule this week. But I'm going to do my damnedest to be here live on Friday. So with that being said, enjoy your week. I'll catch you guys soon. Enjoy this powerful full moon in Scorpio, and enjoy.